It all started with a sudden volcanic eruption that no one could foresee. People tried unsuccessfully to escape from the volcanic eruption. They cried, screamed, and called for help, trying to escape the effects of the volcano. The magma was about to reach the vicinity of the village. The guy notices that there is nothing left of the village. All of it has been destroyed by the disaster. He was tormented by doubts and curiosity. What had caused the end of the world? However, it suddenly turns out that the volcano is the least of people's problems. Standing on the scorched and blazing ground and looking at the alien ships, the guy didn't realize if everything was really happening or not. His right eye lit up, displaying all these horrors: the blood moon, the alien invasion, the end of the world. It made him feel devastated. The guy still thought and hoped he was dreaming it all. Another beam of energy shot out of the alien ship and traveled deep into the Earth. After that, the entire planet was covered in cracks and was instantly destroyed. At the same moment, the guy woke up in his bed and jumped up from the bed in horror. The grandfather wondered if his grandson was okay and if his grandson had a nightmare. The grandfather asks his grandson to calm down because his grandfather is near. The guy smilingly remarks that he is only having a nightmare. It turns out that the grandfather was worried about his grandson for a reason because the grandson slept for a whole day. The grandson notes that sometimes it is good to sleep like this. He tries to get away from the nightmare and asks his grandfather what they will eat, as he is hungry. The grandfather was going to feed the kid anyway. The grandfather reminds him that the grandson should go see Dr. Liang after he eats. Since the boy has taken a big hit, the doctor should examine him. The grandfather even wonders if his grandson has heard his admonition, but the grandson assures him that he has heard everything. After that, the grandfather leaves the house as he had to go to work. He once again reminds his grandson to go see Dr. Liang. While feeding the ducks, the grandson once again remarks that he understands everything and not to let the grandfather worry. The grandfather is still worried about his grandson, though, since his grandson is so stupid. As he continues to feed the ducks, the boy himself notes that he knows exactly what his grandfather is thinking. Everyone in the village, including his grandfather, for 16 years thinks the guy is a complete idiot. His parents died early, so he has lived with his grandfather his entire conscious life. The grandfather said the kid never cried. Until the age of 4, the grandson did not talk, preferring to just sit alone. As various gossips spread around the village before the grandfather had to take the boy to the doctor. Dr. Liang suggested that he had mental retardation. The grandson perfectly remembered the expression on his face at the moment when the doctor said the diagnosis. The grandfather's face was filled with pain and despair. Then the boy clearly heard his grandfather's words. He heard that it was even good, because now he would not have to go to school, and there was no need to look for a bride. As long as the grandfather is alive, no one will harm or offend the boy. It turned out that the grandfather was silent at that moment. The boy did not realize whose voice he was hearing at that moment. Soon he began to hear more and more voices. Male voices, female voices, elderly voices, children's voices. He heard someone talking about how the Huang family was not pitied, insulting them behind their backs in every possible way. Meanwhile, the grandson continued to grow, and there was nowhere to go. Who blamed the child for everything? When the boy heard several voices at once, at that moment he realized that he could hear people's thoughts, the voice of their hearts. Later he received a lot of information, not only about people, but also about plants, nature, and the universe. The huge flow of information was not always assimilated in his head, so in childhood he often fainted and fainted. However, as he grew older, he began to adapt. Other people's thoughts still did not leave his head. While passing by a group of people, he could hear someone complaining in his thoughts that he had lost all his money in betting. Although he could still hear people's thoughts, as he grew older he learned to control and discard unnecessary information. However, he had no control over the data he was receiving from the universe. The day before yesterday, he didn't restrain his curiosity and took a look at the moon, where he discovered a horrifying fact. It turns out that the moon is not a satellite of the Earth. The moon is a battle weapon created by an alien superior civilization to monitor the Earth. Hidden beneath the surface of the moon is a hollow structure full of mechanical devices. There are also thermonuclear weapons and kinetic cannons. The most deadly weapon for Earth is the moon itself. Even a slight change in the moon's position can cause tidal changes on Earth to bring catastrophe. There are too many weapons aimed at Earth. However, what worries the guy the most are the two huge figures he saw on the moon. These are the legendary aliens, from whom the guy received important information. The total time of observation of the Earth is 12,831 years, 4 months and 19 days. The discovered advantages of humans, a pleasant odor. It was from exposure to this information that he passed out for an entire day and night. This information affected most of the final scenes in his dreams. He wondered if the scenes in his dream would come true or not. But the guy decided not to worry about it because the aliens had been watching the Earth for so long but had not done anything about it. At least it occurred to him that if the aliens were treating humans like food, then maybe they were. Most of the unexplained disappearances of people in the world are alien-related. Reflecting on this question, he suggests that until some colossal change happens on Earth, the disappearances are likely to continue. It couldn't go on forever, which meant that someday the day would come when the aliens would attack. He wondered when that day would come. And if that day came, what was humanity to do? Even with all his powers, he couldn't make such predictions. He even brushed the thought away because the fate of humanity did not depend on him. He's just an ordinary country boy, so he doesn't want to think about such things. In the meantime, he needed to stop by Dr. Liang's house as he had promised his grandfather. Seeing the huge crowd, the guy wondered what had happened. As it turned out, Dr. Liang had suddenly disappeared, and no one knew what to do. The village chief and the officer went into the medical center, but they still hadn't come out of there. Dr. Liang was always communicating with the villagers, and suddenly she disappeared without saying anything to anyone. Touching the fingers of his left hand to his temple, the guy started to think. He tried to discard the information about the outside world as it could help him find out information about Dr. Liang. After analyzing the information he received, he found clues based on the boot and wheel marks. There were a total of 5 people and 1 vehicle. The time the footprints were left was 7 o'clock in the morning. From the footprints, he began to reconstruct specific information about the object. Soon he notices that 4 people drove Dr. Liang in their car while she was unconscious. He also had time to notice that Li Fan of the Li family was at the scene at that moment. Li Fan witnessed what was happening. Finally, the village chief and Officer Wang appeared from the nurse's station. Village chief asked the officer where Dr. Liang had gone and why she left without saying a word. Officer Wang noted that the door was open, the lock was not broken, there was no sign of a struggle, and no belongings were missing. The doctor did not respond to the family's calls, which means there is definitely something wrong with this case. An officer asks the crowd if anyone has seen Dr. Liang this morning. Someone remarked that when he came to get the medicine, Dr. Liang was already gone. Li Fan, on the other hand, notices at this point that Dr. Liang is probably already dead anyway, so he decides to keep quiet to avoid getting into trouble. At this moment, Huang Ji runs up to Li Fan and informs the officer that Li Fan saw everything. The blonde panicked and said that he never said that. The village chief wonders if Li Fan saw Dr. Liang. The blonde continues to make excuses, the more he doesn't understand how anyone can believe the words of an idiot. Huang Ji then says that he saw everything because his grandfather asked him to go see Dr. Liang at 7 o'clock in the morning. He went out early, but he decided not to go to the doctor yet. And then he noticed Li Fan standing near a tree. The blonde man started to mumble, and his speech became suspicious. The father couldn't stand it, ran up to his son and hit him. The father didn't understand what all the secrets were about, and he told his son to tell everything he knew. Sitting on the ground and crying, Fan admits that he saw Dr. Liang being led away by several people. The father is furious and doesn't understand why his son didn't tell him right away. The village chief tried to restrain the father. Li Fan admits that he didn't tell him because the men were fierce, and the men also had knives. The boy was afraid that the men would take revenge on him. Village chief immediately asks the officer to check it out. Officer Wang immediately called to verify the information. After the phone call, the village chief asks Officer Wang what they should do. Officer Wang informs him that Dr. Liang's parents have also disappeared. The man is shocked because it might have something to do with the doctor's family. Officer Wang did not want to jump to conclusions about whether or not these events are related. He didn't understand why he would go to such a faraway place to kidnap an ordinary doctor. The village headman asked the officer to rescue Dr. Liang, for she was the local heroine. Huang Ji knew very well that these people were now hiding in an abandoned temple on the mountain, less than 1 kilometer away from the medical center. If the guy told anyone about this, no one would believe him. However, there was a need to hurry, as Dr. Liang was already on the verge of life and death. Dr. Liang was like a sister to the guy, so he didn't want anything to happen to her. After reaching the place, he decided that first he needed to find the places where the traps were set up, and then already reveal the location of the doctor. He had a bad feeling because of the information he received. If the police continued inaction, the doctor's life would be in danger. That's why the guy decided to act on his own. The guy wanted to protect Dr. Liang at all costs. When he arrived at the place, he immediately discovered all the traps set up. He jumped on a tree and tore down all the traps that were set by the criminals. It even amused him to tear down the traps, because setting the trap for the criminals was probably very hard. As he lands on the ground, he notices that if he hadn't scouted the situation, the police officers would have fallen into the trap, but now everything was going to go smoothly. At the same instant, he heard someone's voice. He was too close to the facility and was able to hear the voice of Dr. Liang, who was in danger. All 4 criminals gathered around the doctor. One of the men splashed water on the doctor to rouse her. The ringleader of the whole gang asks that the doctor answer where she hid the golden Buddha. The woman admits that she doesn't understand what's going on. After all, they've had the golden Buddha since childhood, and no one has ever told her where it was found. One man can't hold back any longer. He declares that a couple of idiots stole not only the golden Buddha, but also spent 4 million. He doesn't understand how their daughter couldn't have known about such a thing. Dr. Liang informs him that she doesn't know anything, because her parents abandoned her and she didn't get a single coin from their funds. Therefore, the criminals can kill her, only there would be no point in doing so. The criminals do not understand what to do next, because their plan has failed. Earlier, the man thought that Liang worked as a secretary, and if he finds her, he will definitely be able to get to the golden Buddha. Now it turned out that the woman knew absolutely nothing about it. The man asks the other to leave the woman on the street, as it was time for them to run away. The man asked not to blame him, as the girls saw their faces, so they can't just let her go. Huang Ji decides that now is the time to save Dr. Liang. The men panic when they hear a noise, because it seems that their trap has been triggered and someone is coming up the mountain. However, they still wanted to finish the matter with Dr. Liang. Huang Ji didn't like this situation. He didn't understand why men were so cruel. They left him no choice, and Huang Ji decided to pretend to be an idiot to divert the criminals' attention. The man with glasses didn't realize who appeared in front of him. One of the men pointed out that the man in front of them must be a villager. Dr. Liang asks that the criminals not touch the guy as he is sick and does not recognize the criminals. One of the criminals has heard of him. He recognizes him as Huang Ji, the village's famous idiot. Then the boss orders the man to deal with the idiot. Huang Ji starts to bump away, trying to create a ruckus. Huang Ji wonders why the woman is bleeding. The doctor, on the other hand, tries to protect the guy and ask him to leave the place. The boss is fed up with all this and informs the doctor that she has found a companion in the other world and that he will join her. The man decided to immediately follow the boss's order and deal with the idiot. Huang Ji did not wait for his death and decided to counterattack. The man immediately started panting because he didn't expect such a quick reaction and punch from the idiot. The other criminal immediately stood in his place. He didn't realize what his accomplice was doing. He even called his accomplice useless, and that he always had to redo everything for him. He attacked Huang Ji, but the latter easily grabbed the man's elbow. This blow hamstrung his opponent, and Huang Ji easily finished off his opponent. A third criminal intervened, but Huang Ji easily blocked his attack. Afterwards, Huang Ji sent the criminal flying with a precise leg kick. All the defeated criminals were in front of that idiot. The boss didn't understand why his subordinates still hadn't dealt with the snotty youngster. Wang Zhen, standing on all fours himself, didn't understand why his arms and legs were numb and he couldn't stand up. This made the boss stand up and look at the young idiot in front of him. He found the guy in front of him quite interesting. This was the first time Huang Ji had used this kind of ability. He didn't think that it would go so well. He wasn't a fool and understood very well that even as a strong fighter, it was very dangerous to fight with people who had weapons. The men made one failed attempt after another. As long as Huang Ji observed the state of his opponent's muscles and joints, he could anticipate all of his future actions in advance to give the best possible response. After defeating the two criminals, Huang Ji looked at the boss. The boss immediately got into a defensive stance, and he even asked Huang Ji if he was going to attack them. The boss orders the last of the subordinates to attack Huang Ji together. Huang Ji didn't hesitate and immediately ran to Dr. Liang and told her that he found out that the doctor was kidnapped. The woman is shocked that the guy was able to deal with two criminals. She doesn't understand how the guy managed to do it. The boss and subordinate froze at that moment. Untangling the woman, Huang Ji admits that he just threw a couple of punches indiscriminately. He didn't expect the men to fall so quickly. The woman is hurt, and so the guy wants to get her home as soon as possible. The woman doesn't believe it, and there are still two criminals left. She tells Huang Ji to go down the mountain as fast as possible and call the police. The boss and subordinate, meanwhile, decide to seize their opportunity while Huang Ji forgot about them. With a slight duck and a swing of his elbows, Huang Ji easily knocks the weapons out of the hands of the criminals. The woman pounces on one of the men and tells him not to touch Huang Ji. As soon as the man falls to the floor, the woman immediately tells Huang Ji to run away. However, at this moment, Huang Ji twisted the boss's arm. The boss is the most surprised. To him, the guy seems very strange. He originally thought that Huang Ji was hitting at random, but it turns out that his punches hurt a lot. In the same instant, Huang Ji seals the boss face first into the floor, to the great shock of the doctor and the other criminal. Huang Ji notices that the boss is such a weakling because he didn't even use force, and the boss has already fallen down. As it turns out, Huang Ji often does physical work while the boss is mostly sitting down. After so long, the police finally arrive on the scene. Officer Wang orders the criminals to lower their weapons as they are surrounded. Suddenly, Officer Wang notices a very strange situation. All the suspected criminals are lying on the floor, and their local idiot is standing over the boss. The boss even starts crying at this point. He has been preparing for so many years for this moment, he never thought that some idiot would take and ruin everything. Later, Officer Wang put a vest over the woman and gave her a glass of warm water. To be sure of what was happening, he asked the woman if he had correctly realized that she had been rescued by Huang Ji. Dr. Liang confirms this because if it wasn't for Huang Ji's help, she would have been dead by now. The officer wonders what Huang Ji forgot on the mountain. He also praises the guy and asks him not to run away anymore and not to make grandfather worry. Looking at the criminals, Officer Wang wonders if Lu Jingmin is among them. The boss is shocked. He couldn't understand how the police knew his name. After all, he is usually called by his nickname by everyone. Since the criminals don't want to cooperate, then Officer Wang thinks they will be comfortable keeping quiet in the police station. Huang Ji decides to walk Dr. Liang home. She thanks the guy for being there for her and saving her. The guy is all glowing and states that grandfather says that people should act according to their conscience. Dr. Liang smiled slightly at these words and felt that the guy's grandfather was right on this point. This made the woman become bolder, so she called Officer Wang over and decided to give him some more information about the case. In this way, the kidnapping case in Huazhuang village was safely concluded. Dr. Liang told the police all the details of her involvement in the theft from the museum that year. If she had spoken up earlier about what was so troubling to her, the stone would have fallen from her soul as soon as possible. She had decided to get rid of her attachment to her foster parents too. She didn't want anything to bind them together anymore. The problem with the threatening letter that had appeared was also solved in no time. The boss reported that he had written the letter. He confessed that actually, deep down, he didn't like his nickname, so he decided to write his real name. He was forced to, and he had nothing to do with it. Lu Jingming decided to make himself look like a victim to somehow shorten his prison sentence. However, the police couldn't really believe it, because the other accomplices claimed that Lu Jingmin was their boss. However, the boss continued to deny it and convinced everyone that he was framed in the case. Even though the police had their doubts, they still had no other suspects. As long as it pays off, everyone will talk nonsense to reduce their jail time. The police would not suspect Huang Ji, but he did not behave very nicely. A few days later, when the villagers were harvesting their crops, they were distracted by sudden events. The villagers wondered why the police had come to the place again. As it turned out, the police came along with Dr. Liang's foster parents. Most likely, Huang Ji had somehow reported the whereabouts of the doctor's parents to the police. That was what his despicable act that he had mentioned earlier was all about. After that, the doctor's foster parents were led to the village reservoir. The doctor's foster father reported that it is at the bottom. Officer Wang notices that the couple had built up the reservoir before leaving the province. The parents have already explained everything. They spent all 4 million and only had a few 100,000 left. The golden Buddha was hidden in this reservoir. He also asked that Huang Ji pay attention to those who came with the criminals, since those were from the provincial museum. The guy couldn't blindly believe the criminals that they had spent all the money. After taking a closer look at the man, the guy realizes that the man has a hidden deposit, which is 3,150,485 yuan. Huang Ji even recognized the specific location of the hidden deposit. The foster father naively thought that he would be able to spend his money after he got out of prison, but Huang Ji was not going to let that happen. Soon a chest was recovered from the reservoir. Upon opening the chest, the experts were convinced that in front of them was a golden Buddha of the Tang dynasty, which had been stolen last year from a museum. Officer Wang doubts that it is a golden Buddha, as the element looked more like copper than gold in appearance. However, the expert assures that the Buddha statue is actually much heavier than ordinary bronze statues. After measuring it, they found that the weight of the Buddha is very close to the volume of gold. Therefore, they concluded that the inside of the Buddha statue is actually gold, but the surface is covered with a layer of copper. Officer Wang also believes that the weight will not lie. Huang Ji check whether this is the case. After scanning with his gaze, he realizes that it is not gold. The density of the Buddha statue clearly exceeded that of gold. The Buddha statue was basically composed of iron, silicon, and some unknown element. It seems that the elements that are not found on Earth are remnants of alien civilizations. And it looks like what is inside the statue is some kind of precision instrument that was delivered by an observer from the moon, and the recipient was an Indian monk. The monk was called Jodasita, and he seems to have been a very famous man. The box with the statue was covered with a lid and was being prepared for transportation to the museum. Other than the information Huang Ji had gotten, there was no further information he could get. If only he could open the statue, then he would be able to get more information then. The aliens had been on Earth a long time ago and had even left their creations behind. But the guy was curious about the aliens' purpose. If humans in the eyes of the aliens are just tasty food, then he didn't understand why the aliens would bother giving Earthlings the products of alien civilizations. After he lost the statue of the golden Buddha, then he was lost to the loss of the keys to solving this mystery. He knew very little about alien civilizations, and in addition, he had a dull no scanty supply of relevant scientific and astronomical knowledge. Because of this, his ability to assimilate information could not be utilized to its full potential. Therefore, if he wanted to continue to gather information related to the alien civilization, he could not stay in the mountain village where he lived. He must send to the big city to get more information. Will he manage to do it, how to do it, and will his grandfather let him go? What do you think of this story? And that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you would like to see a sequel, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your wishes in the comments. You can also subscribe to Telegram to know about new videos. Bye everybody.